Okay, our practice session has ended. We are live and we're now recording.
Okay, I guess we'll start. I want to thank everybody for joining us on the first quarter FSS meeting of 2021. Thank you for being here, and it's a pleasure to see some of you who I actually saw last week at the DD Planning Council meetings in the 5 boroughs. So we're going to talk today about COVID, about budget update, and about some work in the regional offices. Just to give you a high level, we've been very busy, as you can imagine, with the budget. Submitted our budget proposals. You probably saw my testimony in February. At this point in the process, we're waiting for the separate branches of the legislature to convene and develop their budget proposals and then begin the negotiations with the governor's office. Obviously been very busy with COVID. We're happy to report that in general, the trends are improving. Numbers of new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are falling fairly significantly. And that is probably in part because of the larger population trends, but also because of, I think, our fairly aggressive and successful outreach for vaccination. We are near the process, the conclusion of the process for our residential programs, starting to make a lot of headway for staff who are working in the community, and now since February 15th, focusing on individuals who reside in the community. I know that there'll be more detail that's going to be presented later during the presentation, so I'm going to pass the baton to Roger and let him start the meeting. So it's a pleasure seeing you all. Thanks.
Hi, nice to see all of you, and remotely as it were, and hopeful for a day when we don't have to stare at each other through little video bubbles, but that is the world we live in right now. So I wanted to maybe go over to Margaret as chair of the FSS committee. I don't know if you wanted to, just for the purposes of convening the meeting, make sure we introduce all the members of the FSS committee, since we do have folks who are formerly members of the committee, and there's also attendees. But Margaret, it would, I think, be useful for folks to introduce themselves as well as identify the geography or region that they come from.
Okay. So maybe I'll do it by the list of participants. I can get it here. Now I'm not getting the list. Well, in any case, I'm Margaret Puddington. I'm from Manhattan, and I'm the chair. And I'm looking, oh, here we go. Chris, would you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Balega.
From?
Region 1.
Okay. Deb Greif.
Hi, I'm Deborah Greif. I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Evie.
Margaret?
Yes.
I'm not technically on, but I wanted to jump on to make sure that Chrissy Neer is our new rep.
Oh, wonderful.
So I just, if she's here, I'll jump
She's
off
here.
Okay,
She's here.
then I'm going to be I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'll do it, but I'm not going to speak.
Okay. Thank you, Evie. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Christina, we welcome you.
Thank
Would
you.
you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Nyer. As Evie mentioned, I'll be replacing Evie for the Sunbelt region.
Wonderful. Thank you. Deb, did you introduce yourself? Yes.
Yes, I did, but in case no one heard, I'm Deborah Greif from Brooklyn.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Gail?
Yes, thank you. I'm Gail Pato. I'm from the Broome region.
Thank you. Jody? Oh, this is the wrong Jody. I don't know who's.
Not sure why I was added as a panelist. This is Jody McNally. I'm just here to listen today.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a member named Jody, and I just jumped the gun too quickly. Karen. I saw her there before. Maybe she stepped away. Lynn White, phone.
Yes, hello. This is Lynn. I'm from Region 1.
Okay. Margaret Raymond. Are you unmuting yourself, Margaret?
Mary Fasano's here.
Well, you have unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm
Okay. And Margaret, where are you from?
from Central New York, East End.
Okay, thank you.
I'm representing
Okay.
both at the moment.
Great. And Maria.
I'm hearing you today.
Hi, Maria Suchi Kozak, Region 3, Westchester County.
We were having a hard time hearing you too, Margaret. Sometimes I understand if you turn the video off, the sound improves. You could try that. I don't know whether it will work or not. And Mary, you introduced yourself, Mary from Long Island. And,
Yes, I did. Here I am.
and Vicky.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vicki Haifa. I'm the Acting Executive Director for the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council.
And Sandra.
Sandy from Very
good. Have I skipped anybody?
Yes, me, Ann Sheriff from Western North Region 1.
Oh, I skipped Al wasn't, okay, and Aaliyah?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'll get right back to you. I want you last.
Hi, this is, good afternoon, all. This is Alia, Queens.
Okay, and Ann Sheriff.
Yes, Western North Region 1.
Great. And I think is that everybody but Al? I think it is. Al.
Hi, everybody. I'm Al Murata from Region 3, Taconic EDRO.
And would you make your announcement?
I have an announcement. I'm finally going to retire. Today will be my last meeting. I'm going to be moving to Maryland in April to be with my grandchildren. It's been an honor and a privilege and a joy serving on this committee for all these years with all of you fine people. And we wish everyone the best.
Thank you, Al. We're going to miss you, and we wish you the best of everything in your future.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Margaret, this
Yes.
is Kathy Nowak.
I'm sorry. There you were. Okay.
I couldn't get in. I'm in there. Thank you.
Good. Okay, Kathy from Staten Island. Okay. Anyone else who hasn't introduced? Any other member who hasn't introduced? Okay. Okay. So then let's return to Bradford.
Yes, this is Crystal Bassler from Western Region 1.
Oh, sorry, Crystal. I guess some people came in afterwards. Okay, okay. Anyone else?
Can you hear me, Margaret?
Yes.
Okay. Can you just answer a quick question? Is this program meant to continue, like it'll mute you automatically after a couple minutes? Because my computer keeps, I'll have it on able to talk, and then if I don't talk, it just mutes itself. Is that correct? Is that what this? Does?
I don't know what it's supposed to do, but I have that experience too.
Okay.
It's how you have programmed it, Karen.
Oh, okay. I'll have to play around with it. That's what happened when I had my introduction. I had it unmuted, but it automatically muted itself. So
okay.
I'm good to go.
Maybe the settings.
Well, thank you, Margaret, for leading us through that introductions. It's not easy to do in this without being able to kind of make eye contact around the room. So I do appreciate your work there, Al. Let me echo the sentiments that are in the chat room. Wishing you the very, very best. Thank you for your years of service, and excited for you in your next chapter. So congratulations on that. Now, the first item that we had on the agenda, I don't know if we can advance to the agenda slide. Thank you so much. There was the pandemic. Hi, Anna. Thank you for that note in the chat. Pandemic-related topics, as I think the commissioner had mentioned, we've obviously been very, very much focused as an agency over the last year in the fight against COVID, and I think have been able to share a lot of information as we've gone on with this group as well as others. Our focus at this point is really about getting as many people vaccinated as possible. I think we're having some very good results in that area, and particularly as the residential population, which were prioritized first, and now as we're focusing on the kind of at-home population. I wanted to just kind of open for the committee. I know this was an agenda item that folks wanted us to address, and just kind of get a sense of what questions or comments or concerns that people may have at this point, so we can make sure that we address them. Margaret, I don't know if you have some specifics, or other members of the committee might have some specifics on that front.
I think others have some questions. I can't find the hand raised. Josie, where's the hand raised? Oh, there it is. It's in the bottom of participants. People, if you want to speak, there's a little hand raise symbol at the bottom of your participants list.
This is Josie. Deb Greif has her hand up.
Thank you, Josie.
Hi, Roger, this is my biggest concern. I know that you did the group homes, and now you're doing families with children who live at home. I would like, the pharmacies don't seem to know that, and a lot of the doctors don't seem to know or be aware of that. And I'm not talking about like a heart care YI or HRC clinic. I'm talking about, because not everybody takes their children there. So can something be done? So you let like Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, the city hospitals, state hospitals, to know that the parent, that they can give our children who are also under 65 the COVID-19 vaccine.
Got it. So there's two components to your question, right? So the one component is the eligibility, and the second component is the distribution channels. So in terms of the eligibility, I think there are a number of ways that could be made known to the vaccinating site, and including the I am eligible tool. I think what people may be running up against is, depending upon the vaccinating site type, there may be specific populations that are targeted with that vaccination site. What we've tried to do with respect to the individuals living at home is leverage our care coordination platform, the CCOs, to help facilitate that, because the goal has been to use for the at-home population. For the residential population, we were obviously using the residential provider as a primary point of coordination, because working with them, working with the local health departments in the particular county, or in New York City where you're found, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, to identify appropriate vaccinating opportunities. That is also, and to partially address your comment in the comment box in terms of access, and in specifically access for people with autism. Part of what we're trying to do is, and we've had successes with specific clinics that are sort of reserved for people who have disabilities. We've had success also in more, I would call it, generic vaccinating sites, but the goal that we have is for the at-home population to leverage that care coordination platform to assist it, because I think that the barriers are addressed kind of at a local level most often than they are sort of at a statewide level is the thinking.
Roger, our pharmacist said if you could get a directive sent to the Walgreens, they would be then very glad to do it.
Okay, why don't we take it back?
That's what they asked for.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
And then I believe Sandra Money, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
It's money, the way it's spelled. I was wondering if OPWDD is going to be seeing the number of staff who have died from COVID, and also. Pardon?
I'm sorry, you skipped out on the important word. Could you just restate the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Will OPWDD be releasing the number of staff who have died from COVID? And is there a place on the OPWDD webpage or someplace where you can get data for the COVID deaths and individuals confirmed positive?
Yeah, so at this point, we have not released staff information in terms of deaths. And we do not have the COVID data on our website. The data actually has changed, daily. What we have done with a variety of our stakeholder groups in response to specific inquiries provided the most up-to-date data that we have. I know that, for example, Margaret sits on the statewide COVID stakeholders meeting that at this point occurs bi-weekly. When COVID was more prevalent, we met more frequently. And so we make a habit there of sharing with a variety of our organized stakeholder groups the most recent data, which is usually, the Wednesday data at a Thursday call, for example. So that's been our mechanism. The problem with putting things in the website is just the changeability of the data day to day makes that a little more challenging. But if you want the most current data, I don't have that data on hand, but I can give that to you through Margaret, or just give it to you directly. I'll just ask my team to provide what would probably be yesterday's data at this point. Yes, Margaret.
I do send out minutes, so to speak, after each meeting, and the data is included in the minutes. So if you look at the last report that I sent, you'll find it.
Thanks, Margaret. I think you told me at one point, but I didn't remember that. So thank you.
I've sent that to my people on the committee, but this is a question that someone from the committee had gotten from someone who's not on the committee, who has asked for this information from the state, and they filed a FOIL request, and nothing seems to be coming through, and we're just wondering why is this not being available to the public, the way everything else is being made available to the public?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a member of the committee, there's no restrictions on sharing that information. So you can feel free to share it wherever and when.
Like I said, I've shared it with my committee members, but it's somebody who was talking to one of my committee members who was asking for this information, who had said that they had filed a FOIL with the state and they haven't received anything. And they were kind of wondering, why is this not being...
Got it. Yeah, no, what I'm saying is if the committee member wants to share the most recent data, then that's absolutely fine. I can't speak to a FOIL. I just don't know. We have a FOIL team and I'm sure they're looking at it, but I don't have the specifics on that.
Okay, thank you.
Other COVID-related questions? Hi, Margaret. You're muted, Margaret.
Sorry. I do have a couple of questions, a couple about data. One is, are we capturing when you divulge the number of fatalities, does that capture all fatalities, including any that might have occurred in hospitals?
Yes. So
it does. I thought so.
The way we have shared our data is we talk about a fatality with somebody who has a diagnosis of COVID. So those are the, so if you will, there's two pieces in those two fields. And so that captures, we think, the fullest cohort of individuals that we have data about.
Mm-hmm. And is it OPW's experience that hospitals did, probably in the beginning of the pandemic, discharge people who were positive back to residences?
Well, I know there have been some concerns about that. I do think that one of the strategies that we employed at OPWDD was the creation of alternative residential sites.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something that I think we had great experience with in partnership with our provider community. So one of the things we did was we authorized a provider to, that was at the point where day habs had been suspended, had been emptied. So there was a lot of, if you will, vacant property around that was, suitable for folks. So we authorized providers to establish these alternative residential sites. By my count, there's about 125 of them that were created around the state. Obviously, more of them downstate than upstate, just given what we were experiencing last March and April. And so a provider that had the need to cohort somebody who might have COVID and may need to separate them from others who do not, had that opportunity. The only kind of impediment, if you will, or process that we placed is we did ask the providers to send us the safety plan, so that they would demonstrate to us that, in fact, that the day hab or sometimes an administrative site that they were trying to use was in fact a safe place for a person with a disability to be for a couple of weeks. That it have a place to, provisions for food, provisions for, for restrooms, et cetera, a bed. And we would turn those around in about 24 hours. So we really weren't, we weren't a barrier there. So as I said, when you count the number of safety plans that came in, it was about 125. We're using round numbers. And so that was, I think, a really important strategy for us to, for providers that I can't safely cohort this individual back at the home that I normally operate. I essentially open up a pop-up residence in an alternative site, and that provides the assistance to kind of get through the problem.
Okay. Could you talk about the new CDC guidelines? And,
Before we get there, I just want to go. Maria has had her hand up and has put a couple.
Sure. Go right ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, the question is, I noticed that the sheets that Margaret sends out give us a total CUME data picture, but is there any way to capture the data period to period? We talk about declining numbers, but you can't really tell from the CUME data.
Yeah, that is, yeah, no, I mean, we tend to verbally report that out. I'm hesitant because I just don't have that data on me right now. I can for it and kind of cycle back to it. I think worse than not giving data is giving inaccurate data.
Correct.
We focus on that COVID-19 stakeholder call and making sure that, we have the right data for the day. But, what we do look at from an operational perspective is we tend to look at, new cases week to week. Now we're looking at new vaccinations week to week, and then obviously hospitalizations and fatalities, as in terms of our process, in thinking about where we need to do more interventions or sometimes when we can relax interventions.
Right. My question wasn't really about going back to dissect that data, but more going forward. Is there a way to include the period to period information in the future reporting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, beyond your meeting, I should say.
Yeah, I get it. In terms of, there's a question, we can certainly look at whether we should be putting that information up on the website. Our instinct has been that, particularly as we were in the middle of the most difficult parts of the pandemic, we were actually reporting out daily data, and we're we're hesitant to put things out that quickly become untrue or outdated. And so we were trying to respond in real time rather, we tend to be a little bit better, things like, we have a quarterly utilization data on the website of Medicaid services. That seems to something we're a little more capable of accomplishing and not having it quickly become, wrong. So, but we can take a look at that.
Thank you.
Anything else? I don't see any other. Hi, Margaret. Yes. Yes, you're muted, but your hand is up.
I'm sorry, I don't multitask very well. Could you talk about the new CDC guidelines for as they affect residences and also day programs?
Yeah, so this came out, I believe. Whoop, we got somebody with an unmuted line. Thank you. I believe those came out within the last day or two. And so the usual process in New York State is, of course, the CDC guidelines, if they're revisions, and that we, our Department of Health would look at that. So we're in that midst of that conversation with the Department of Health. There isn't an OPWD specific, without collaboration with, our partners who are the public health leads. So, we're certainly aware of the new CDC guidance. I expect that we will be accommodating that in New York State's practice, but it's just there's typically an internal process for kind of getting that, digesting it, understanding the context with respect to New York State, and then formally issuing revised guidance. I will say also what we are working on is guidance around when and how can we relax some of the standards, some of the restrictions that have been put in place in the context of vaccination, right? So we're trying to think through that, that problem, which is part of what the new CDC, guidelines are trying to. But to take an example, we have very significant limitations on the number of people who can be in a day program, in a day habilitation program. What happens when you end up with a substantial portion of individuals are vaccinated and some are not, right? And some maybe cannot be, or some may have declined. Those are some of the questions we're starting to try to think through. I imagine that we'll probably be in a position over the next several weeks to be able to articulate some guidance on that. And then the other thing, just in that same vein that we are working on, is there were a lot of flexibilities that were extended over the course of the last year, flexibilities around things like abbreviated training, flexibilities around portability of background checks, et cetera. There are a number of things that we did as part of our crisis response. And, we're going to need to figure out some of the flexibilities maybe extend into the permanent feature of the service system, and some of them, we need to kind of catch up. So we're beginning to think about how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that is, thoughtful and responsive, not sudden, but also recognizing that the longer you delay in doing that catch up, the harder it is to catch up, right? So we're beginning to think about what that I don't know, new normal is kind of an abused term at this point, but what does that new normal look like? When are we back in new normal? And what does that mean for all of the things that we did as crisis response mechanisms that were necessary at the time, but we may want to start to unwind.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so there's a comment that I see in the chat room in terms of mask wearing and vaccination. It looks like it may have just come to me directly. Yeah, so that's in the same vein, right? And I think there we're very, very likely to be following more general New York State guidance, as opposed to, say, OPWDD, which has some specific requirements around day programming and say background checks, where we might be have our own pathway that we're in terms of the relationship between mask wearing and vaccination, I think that's very likely to be a more enterprise-wide public health type strategy at this point. But those are all the kind of questions we're trying to sort through. We're inventorying them. We're looking at the new CDC guidance, and the good news is we're getting to a point, at least with the residential population, where vaccination, that has gotten to a level where we can start to think about that. We're not quite there yet on the at-home population. Those individuals were prioritized sort of later, than the residential folks. So we just haven't gotten as much, penetration into that community for vaccination. But it's certainly something that we're hopeful we can, over the next number of months, start to unwind, start to kind of get back towards something resembling, normal life.
Roger, I still have a question related to my other question about putting it on the website. Is there any reason why the stakeholders meeting information that Margaret sends to us can't be put onto the website?
I said, we can definitely take a look at that. We have not done that previously, but I understand the concern. I need to talk to the web team and I need to talk to my data team and see, what makes the most sense there. I don't have a specific answer for you other than I need to look into that.
Okay. I really appreciate if you do that, because I really think it's important that it get on the website so people can see it and not just have to try and find somebody who's, in the statewide committee or on the local committees to talk to about it.
I understand the point. I just am hesitant. I want to talk to folks in order to understand what the mechanics of that would be.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so are we done with COVID related items? I can't see all the hands if they're physical because I only see a certain number of little bubbles. Okay, hearing none, why don't we move on to budget? And I know, Chris, you had some thoughts that you wanted to share with the committee, Pelega?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much, Roger, and hello, everyone. Sorry that I can't seem to get my video working today. Yeah, I wanted to comment on two issues. First is the now rescinded 20% withhold on payment for non-Medicaid services and the 5% cut to non-Medicaid services that's included in the governor's current budget proposal. I, along with thousands of New York State families, am both grateful and relieved that the 20% withhold on payments for non-Medicaid services, which was implemented in October 2020, has been repealed and will be refunded. Unfortunately, this action does not fully mitigate the substantial negative impact this so-called cash management strategy had on the clients OPWDD serves, the agencies that provide their services, and the families that are foundational to the success of OPWDD. In many cases, the 20% withhold is a 100% cut in services to families who are already among our most challenged. For example, family reimbursement, an important and popular FSS program that reimburses families for certain costs associated with supporting their intellectually and developmentally disabled loved ones at home, was discontinued by numerous agencies. They simply could not afford to sustain the program without full reimbursement. Additionally, a number of agencies across the state indicated that they would not be able to go forward with substantial service contracts because of the challenges presented by the withhold and the uncertainty surrounding whether their agency would eventually be made whole. This loss of critical services and uncertainty unnecessarily added to the already heavy burden that the families we have pledged to support carry every day. Furthermore, understanding that DOB did not engage OPWDD to develop a projection and plan regarding how the withhold would impact families prior to implementation elevates my concern. I do understand that Division of Budget faces an extreme challenge due to the impact of COVID-19. At the same time, it is clear that this unnecessary and facile action should never have been implemented. We must all work to ensure that such a blind approach is never again used to make decisions that will have profound impacts on developmentally disabled New Yorkers and the families who support them. Of course, we all want to do everything possible to support our developmentally disabled loved ones. At the same time, we recognize the economic reality that has given rise to the proposed 5% budget cut to non-Medicaid services. So as the teams at OPWDD and the Division of Budget and the members of the New York State Legislature deliberate this proposed cut, I ask that the following be included in your consideration. Number one, it is my belief that OPWDD has been realizing cost savings due to underutilization of services, including non-Medicaid funded services, throughout the pandemic. Despite some effort, I have been unable to confirm or dispel this belief. Being in a position of not knowing where the cost of service delivery stands relative to budget leaves me concerned that we may, even if unwittingly, be balancing the budget, at least in part, on the backs of the developmentally disabled. Two, FSS programs are established via a localized RFP process. This process is an opportunity to redeploy funds that may have become available through contract completions and reductions. For some time, this process has been on hold. It is my understanding that there are a number of program contracts that continue to await final approval, as well as approved contracts that were subsequently placed on hold. While I did not have the data, it appears that there is a significant amount of money being saved through the moratorium on FSS RFPs. Again, these are important, locally targeted programs that provide direct relief to families struggling to keep their intellectually and developmentally disabled loved ones safe and at home. It's quite possible that these budgeted but undeployed funds might easily total more than the 5% reduction being proposed. With these points in mind, I'm wondering why we are now even considering triple dipping to take another 5% from the one program, Family Support Services, that is specifically designed to relieve the biggest budgetary challenge OPWDD faces, minimizing the need for residential placements. Given that FSS is less than 1% of funds under OPWDD control, it just makes no sense to me. So thank you all for your time, for your consideration, and especially for your dedication to the developmentally disabled and the families who support them.
Well, thank you very, very much, Chris, for those thoughts. I'd like to maybe try to address a couple of them, and then we could, have a conversation as a group. So, the first, I think, part to understand when it comes to our budget is we look at it from a year-to-year fiscal year perspective. So that's April 1 to, March 31 of a particular year. I forget. And so in this fiscal year, which we're almost done with, we had certain areas where we significantly overspent and certain areas where we, underspent because sort of historical spending patterns were disrupted for the obvious reason of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the actions we were able to take essentially by taking advantage of some of the underspending and offsetting, other planned actions is we were able to push. There was originally an October 1 of 2020 date for the imposition of the cuts to the occupancy factor and the vacancy adjustments that were in Medicaid rates. We were able to push that back to May 1, 2021. And the importance of those dates is it's from one state fiscal year to the next. So the underspending that was happening in certain areas, particularly in the day program, was essentially able to be, used to cover, if you will, otherwise planned declines in spending in another domain. The second piece of it was obviously the 20% that you're referring to. Once again, where there's underspending, and also actually, some greater revenues, I think, to the state than otherwise would have was predicted, because the budget is a prediction of what will happen. We were able to, with the support of the Division of Budget, revoke that 20% withhold and make the payment. That gets us to March 31 of this year, which is the end of our state fiscal year. Now we have a proposed budget, and I say proposed because, of course, the legislature, as the commissioner indicated, has yet to weigh in on it. And then, of course, there will be a negotiation to realize a finalized budget. What's particularly unique, at least in my own experience about this budget, is that the budget identified certain items. One was the one you mentioned, which is the 5% reduction to state-only dollars of funding, inclusive of FSS monies. And the second was a 1% across the board cut to essentially Medicaid rates. And those two items were specifically identified in the governor's budget proposal as being subject to restoration if there was sufficient, federal support. Now, for those of us who follow, that side of the coin, right? The news in terms of support for New York State as well as other states has been quite good lately. Obviously, there isn't a signed bill, but I think all signs are pointing in a positive direction. So we are hopeful, along with you, about the ability to achieve that restoration. Once again, what I think makes this budget unique is that it specifically named the cut that you're referring to as restorable based upon a contingency. I've not seen that before. If it's existed, I just hadn't noticed it. So once again, we are in a position where the assumption made in the budget document that was drafted and issued in middle of January was that those funds were not available, because at the time, you budget not assuming monies that you don't have, right? You can't plan to spend things that you don't have in a household budget or a state budget. So now that those premises may be changing, right, that there may be additional resources, I think then that the conversation is ripe. Certainly your feedback helps us have that conversation. Certainly the legislature is going to have an opportunity, to weigh in and say in what ways that the governor's executive budget proposal did or did not, in their estimation, meet the mark. So I think we have a lot of things to do between now and assuming an on-time budget at the end of this month in planning for next fiscal year. But just to understand the construct that we work under, which is each year we have to come in on target. So things we might have done because there was underspending in this fiscal year don't necessarily mean you can do something next year unless you believe the premise of what happened this year is durable. And what we're currently assuming as a budgeting proposal is we're going to get back to normal. We're going to have, the significant underspending that we had in day program won't be there, because we're hopeful that obviously people will be able to once again access day programming in the way that they have previously. We don't plan to, as we did this year, suspend the operations of day programs for a number of months. So once again, if we get into the year, midway through the year, and we find that some of our assumptions are untrue, we do have the ability to make adjustments even midstream. But this year we spent a lot more money on things like PPE than we certainly thought we would at the beginning of the fiscal year. So there are sometimes when spending grows and sometimes when spending declines, and that's partly what we managed throughout the course of the year. I hope that wasn't an over explanation, but it's actually sort of how we think about the problem and where we situate here in the second week of March near the end of the fiscal year. Margaret, I saw you nodding and taking notes, which is my signal that I'm at least making some sense, which I appreciate.
Yes, no, that it did make very good sense. I'm glad you went through that explanation. I also would like to mention, I'm sure you know, but I would like to mention to the other members that there was an increased FMAC of 6.2%. That's the federal percentage, the federal contribution. Normally, it's only 50%, and it was raised, it was increased. And it's very smart people have estimated that the amount of money brought in by OPWDP services with these increased FMAP amounts to over $400 million. It will by the end of December. And none of that money has found its way back to us or to any other of the other state agencies. And this is an area for advocacy, and I don't know whether you're at liberty to say anything about that, Roger, but it's certainly an important resource that's out there sitting there that has been redirected away from us.
Well, I'm not sure that I would necessarily accept the framing that you've given it, Margaret. I do understand what you're saying, but I think that it's always hard to describe or mark the avoidance of more drastic action against a budget. So, so I think that there's actually two FMAP enhancements, just to be clear. There's one that occurred in one of the pieces of legislation that went through during this past year, during this past calendar year. And then there is in the proposed legislation that has made its way, I guess, at this point through both houses of Congress, also an FMAP adjustment. And I'm certainly familiar with some of the analysis and advocacy when once again distinguishing between sort of last fiscal year and this fiscal year. For this purpose, I think, last fiscal year, we were as OPWD, I believe, able to, I know that there was pain felt through the 20% withhold. And I know there were other pains that were felt, but we were able to, I think, avoid some other more dramatic actions because there was some support, some additional federal revenue that was being generated. I'm aware of the advocacy that I believe, some of the provider community has been engaged in, as well as some of the family advocates around how the money that would be generated through the enhanced FMAP for the new bill that, assuming it becomes law, should be used. And certainly, I think that's going to become an important conversation in the next several weeks as the final budget is put together, assuming there's money that's coming to the state. How ought that money be allocated to various uses?
Yeah, I thought that was earmarked for the Home and Community-Based Services waiver.
Yeah, there are, and I have people kind of looking at the bill, so I can't say that I have a full understanding at this point, but I understand there are multiple components, different programs, targeted case management, so there's a lot described in there, and my understanding as well is that the original bill had more detail than the bill that currently seems to be making its way as towards final passage. So part of the question will be what kind of guidance comes up from the federal government about exactly what the intention is here. I know there's an opportunity. I just don't know that I certainly don't have enough information at this point to say, and X millions of dollars are going to become useful for a particular purpose. The other thing to make note of in that context is my understanding is these are resources that are time limited. They're going to be for like a year or something like that. They're not permanent adjustments to the FMAP. So one of the things one must be cautious about when that kind of money comes in is if you spend it in a way that creates ongoing obligations as opposed to using it in sort of a one-time opportunity. You may be setting yourself up for an out-year problem in terms of building something and then having no way to support it the next year. So that would be also something that you would want to consider as we think about this opportunity.
True. Thank you.
Roger, thanks so much for your response to my statement. It was definitely very helpful. I'm taking from what you've said that you've recognized at least some of the detail that's going into that underspend, overspend trade-off. I'm wondering if you have any idea how that equation might net out at end of year, And also wondering if you, as you had mentioned, looking forward, returning to a more normal situation, if there's any detail on projection to budget that you might be able to share that might be created to look at next year as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, so in terms of this year, we are actually currently engaged in what we call our cash closeout exercise. It looks right now like we're going to basically hit our expected spending from the year, having, for example, one of the things we did is we spent on the 10-1 to 5-1 relief, that cost us a certain amount. There are other things where we made up the 20% withhold, and we're certainly looking to get that money out, get the various monies out, before the end of the fiscal year. So our goal in the projection at this point is that we would be, fully spending our cash target by the close of the state fiscal year, which is the end of this month. In terms of next year, it becomes a little more challenging. The year-to-year growth that we project in cash available to the agency as part of the governor's proposed budget was a 2.8% increase in spending on all things. That's the top line, number. And then built into that were certain ideas about the growth in just the service population, who might be presenting themselves, looking for services, also who might unfortunately be passing or no longer, in need of services, and what that ratio, the average cost of those services. And so we have some things in the budget that I think folks are aware of where, for example, we're trying to have folks who might be able to benefit from more community-based supports as opposed to 24/7 certified. That would be, a way we're diverting some people away from that, what was, I think, correctly indicated by you, Chris, as the most expensive, form of support that we offer. So we have models based upon, a variety of inputs, both in terms of what's our service array, what the cost of those services are, and what we expect the underlying demand to be. And we kind of work that into a model that becomes the cash projection. And then what we do, on a monthly basis is we sort of check our math, right, if you will. So we say, okay, how are we doing? What if we expected, for example, 2% growth we expected, for example, 2.5% growth last year in the CCO enrollment. We got 10%. So that was something that we could see was happening and so that then, drove additional expense in that particular service array much higher than, we'd expected. So, that's the kind of thing we monitor and we try to adjust as we can in real time.
Great. Thanks so much, Roger. I really appreciate it. And I guess the final thing I would say is if there is an opportunity to share those models of what may happen in the future, that would really be awesome. I think it would help a lot of us understand the situation a lot more clearly. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. My suggestion would be that we, and I'll make a note of it. I'm playing the role of Kevin today. For those of you who know Kevin, he wasn't feeling well, so I stepped in. So I know what the models do. I don't know how the models are constructed. So I would have to maybe we can arrange a separate conversation that would kind of be able to go into some more the more technical aspects of it. That would be something we can certainly arrange.
That'd be very cool. Thanks so much.
Sure. Is there I'm looking at you, Margaret, not only because you're at the center of my screen when I'm looking at you, but also because you're the committee chair. Is there anybody else that has a question or concern or comment? Maria, I see your hand up. Yep.
Yes, I had my hand up in the little chat thing.
Okay.
So this is to piggyback off of what Chris's statement indicated, specifically about the RFPs. As you know, in our area, we have lost close to $500,000 in RFP money. Some of it was RFP activity that was halted, and also we lost monies from programs that walked away because they could not handle the 20% cut. So my question is, what exactly is happening with that allocation? Because according to Chris's statement, it's on hold. But are we going to reallocate the money, or is that money completely gone to our region to forever and ever? I can't get a straight answer locally.
So I know that in our budget, we haven't assumed any changes to the FSS program. Abiba, you're on the line. Do you have any insight about, I just don't know what the details are in your particular region, Maria. I'm sorry, I just don't have that information.
Right. So letters had gone out to those programs that were granted the funds back in I want to say 2019. And at the end of 2020, those same agencies received letters that indicated that OPWDD was taking the money back. And we, as a local council, have been asking, well, will we ever see that money again? And we don't get an answer.
Well, yeah, I don't want to give you an answer for the purposes of giving you an answer when I don't know what the answer is. So, but let me, I'm making some notes of it, and we can certainly follow up. I simply just don't know the details of what was allocated, what was suspended, what the what the story is.
Because according to Chris's statement, it was more of it's on hold. But we were led to believe that we might never see the money. So I just want clarification as to whether that money will ever come back into our region.
And that's the Long Island region, is that correct?
No, Westchester County.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I also believe that Rockland was impacted from what I saw.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can have somebody look into that and get back to you on that. I don't want to give an answer one way or the other when I just don't happen to know what it is.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else on budget wise? Hi, Margaret.
I was wondering what the rationale was for the cuts to the CCOs in light of the fact that you said the increase in people served was quite impressive.
Yeah. So once again, the challenge that we have is our spending on CCO increase. It's a per member per month, rate that we pay for the CCO service. So an enrollee drives a cost. It's our understanding and expectation that as the number of enrollees goes up, there ought to be some, kind of economies of scales and efficiencies that can be achieved by the CCOs. Our understanding was and is that there was a revenues going to the CCOs in excess of cost for running the program. And so that the goal, the two goals, one was that, we need to mitigate the risk to the overall financial plan with regard to this higher enrollment in the program. And the second is we thought we could do that with the, with getting revenues matching costs. Now, I know that there's been some substantial conversation as to whether, we misapprehended the nature of their cost structure and, and as it compares to the revenue. So there's a conversation that's very active right now, engaging them and the Division of Budget and others to try to, understand better whether, the data, because, data drives decision making. And so that's something that I know that we continue to look at. But the idea is twofold. One is that we were spending in an aggregate sense, a lot more on CCO than we had projected. And the second was that we understood that they had costs that were less than revenue, so we could, engage in a rate cut without damaging the underlying model. Anything else on things budget? So just in terms of the calendar here, we sit today on, I think, Tuesday. I believe that the legislature will, I think, offer their opinions either in the form of a one house or a resolution or something. I believe early next week, maybe Monday. So folks ought to, pay attention to that, and then that traditionally kicks off the opportunity for the executive and the legislature to compare notes and come up with a final resolution. So that tends to be what consumes our our last couple of weeks of March as we engage in that conversation. So that'll be the next kind of moment for you all to and others who might be paying attention to look at and say, how did the legislature appreciate or not appreciate those proposals as they pertain to OPWDD. Passing on to item 3 on the agenda. Does that make sense to you, Margaret? Fantastic. So I don't know. I know that the FSS Council provided some thoughts near the end of the year in terms of areas where you thought there was room for growth and improvement, and I've actually hopefully addressed a few of them, in today. But I don't know whether you want to kind of give a highlight. That's not necessarily a document that the folks, particularly those who may be watching this meeting, would have seen. I'm wondering how you'd like to proceed, Margaret. You want to kind of introduce a topic and then we can see what we can do.
That would be useful. That would be useful. I could just give you a bullet about what the item is, and then you could tell us OPW's response or preliminary response. Okay. So the first category was advocacy, and our first concern was we thought that we asked that OPW strengthen its advocacy efforts.
Gotcha. So I guess the question I had when reading that is, in what domain and to what end? What are we trying to internally, externally? What's being sought after in that domain? If
large cuts mainly.
Gotcha.
And fighting off the ones that are particularly harmful.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, folks do understand that, there are external and internal conversations. And so, one of the things that we do as OPWDD is certainly, we press a conversation internally with our various internal stakeholders to, advocate for the needs of this, of the population we serve. And there's also, the need in the context of the budget for there to be an overall balanced budget, as part of the obligation to propose one. I mean, I think, we have certainly, if we're discussing the 20%, withhold, there's certainly been a lot of conversations over the last number of months. When talking about COVID, I think that, one of the things that I'm proud of is the specific response that we've been able to engender with respect to people with developmental disabilities. Early in one of the pandemic responses, there was a hospital visitation guidance that, issued, and then very shortly thereafter, there was an amendment to that that was that allowed for, essential supporters of people with developmental disabilities to be, visitors in hospitals, and it was held out. I've seen some of the national press and journals as a national model. That's a product of advocacy that happens internally, right? So, and then, we do absolutely hope to share as much information as we can with advocates such as the FSS committee to be able to, to the degree to which you think that, different decisions need to be reached, either by us or by others, we can provide you the information that can allow you to, to engage in your own advocacy as well.
Hey, Roger, this is Ted. I don't want to take credit for the advocacy that families made on behalf of that hospital visitation issue. I mean, to be fair to families, families won that argument, and we were able to then leverage the family advocacy to bring that into chamber and effectuate it. But the families really made that happen, and families and individuals are very effective as advocates and in many ways much more successful than we are. So I want to acknowledge the work the families did, not take credit for it, but again, point out how they can be complementary. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It's an entirely fair point, Commissioner. Apologies, yes.
There was a fair amount of hounding going on in those COVID calls on that topic. Yeah.
It just, I want you to know, it worked. It worked very effectively, and we're really grateful for what you did.
Well, that's what we want. We want to be partners.
Yeah.
Because we are stronger that way. You listen to us, but then you also work for us. As that's what happened.
Margaret, I think Deb Greif is trying to get a word in. She's muted, but she's got her hand up.
Okay.
Well, I agree. Thank you, Commissioner, for acknowledging the families, advocacy, and I also agree with Margaret, because I want to say this. Many times I'm told they want to hear what I have to say, but when I tell them, they don't want to like what I'm saying, because I tell you when times programs are working or not. I also let you know that if something's not working, I try to give the solution. In reference with the legislators, we need to understand more what we're going through. It's also frustrating to me when we families who actually are living this, sometimes we're only asked for help at the last minute. And I would like to be, and then what I agree with Mark, we are partners. And it's us who has to set policies too, and it's what we know is really going on. I'm not here to make a penny. I'm here because I want to make sure that when it's my time to live there, my son and others will always have some form of services and help. I don't want to go back to Willowbrook days. I remember Willowbrook. And we also want to thank our commissioner for when parents and individuals get up to speak, he listens to us, and I appreciate that. He wants to hear our side, even though, and Roger, I just want you to understand, sometimes when we're saying things you don't want, you may not like, it doesn't mean we don't like you. We want to fix this problem because we see this in a different angle. I'm seeing this as a parent. So that's where I'm and a lot of other parents are coming to, but I still thank you because we're one of the few OA agencies in New York State that do listen and hear parents best. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Deb. We appreciate it.
Are there other comments on that item?
I also would like to thank the Commissioner, Roger, and whoever brought my concerns to the Commissioner and Roger. It's always very helpful and feel like someone is shoulder to shoulder with parents. I see it and I feel it. So I really appreciate, it's not just pennies and dimes or percentages. It's the most importantly, it doesn't matter how much you know. It matters if you care. So the care is there and it's so evident. So I thank you, the Commissioner, and I thank you, his dedicated team.
Thank you again. So.
Margaret, if we could pivot back, it looks like Michael Smith has a budget-related question. Is that?
Can you hear me, Roger?
We can, thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just heard it deep in as I was saying that. So, hey, my question on this budget-related item, so much of the budget is it just seems so vague and inconclusive, and I know the legislators have been very frustrated by this also. A couple things that I think we seriously need to look at. One is the overall epidemic crisis of the sharp growth in autism that we have seen. And a couple years ago, I worked on a bill with Assemblyman Abenanti and Senator Parker that directed the 5 state agencies, OPWDD being one of them, to do a cost study and report to the legislature on the cost of autism. I know the commissioner that Tom had asked for that at the recent mental hygiene budget hearings just a couple weeks ago. And my concern is that there was a deadline of April 20th or April 1st of 2020 to provide that report to the legislature. And none of the agencies complied with it. And my concern is that nobody, whether it's OPWDD or the legislature, is going to be able to manage this crisis if you can't even measure the size and magnitude of the problem. Now, if you go to SEDCAR data, which is, State Ed's own data, you will see numbers of 1 in 32 kids with autism in Bronx County, 1 in 32 kids with autism in Richmond County. And that doesn't even measure the number of kids in the system there that have autism that are classified under other health impairment or multiple disabilities. We have a huge crisis here. According to the, I would strongly advise you to look at the Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network from the CDC that does most of the major epidemiology. I have, I had a meeting with Health Committee Chair Gottfried and the top epidemiologist from the CDC in New York City 2 years ago on this issue. And what we're seeing right now, according to the CDC and their own epidemiologists, is the fact that not only are the rates increasing, but that the largest or the broadest increase in autism is among those kids with the highest level of impairment. Those kids who have epilepsy, and those kids who are nonverbal, and those kids who have pretty profound intellectual disability. And so I would really want to encourage you to take a serious look at this. I don't think, I'm very frustrated that OPWDD has not provided that report back to the legislature. I don't think anybody's looking for perfection, but I will supply it to you after this, but we've taken our own public data sets that show that the cost of autism to New York State over the next 10 years is going to be over $400 billion, Roger. It's going to be over $400 billion in the next 10 years. That's what autism is going to cost. And you know what, the legislators, we try to let them know we're seeing this increase year after year after year. And if we get 1% or 3% in the budget, that's not nearly accounting for the rapid increase in autism. And like I said, these aren't just numbers. These are, we're seeing that widest increase among the children with the highest level of impairment. So we have a public health crisis here. We're not dealing with it. And it's very frustrating. I think that what is going to happen, and what I would encourage OPWDD to do, I know it's hard to do in the system that is set up, but we're going to have to innovate out of this crisis.
Tom,
are not, there's going to have to be more choices to be able to, for people to be independent, to make those type of accommodations.
Yeah. Tom, can I just get a word in if you don't mind? And,
sure,
I want to make sure that there are some other items that I think the FSS committee members wanted to make sure that we addressed. So
I think you're not addressing this, Roger.
Tom,
you guys aren't.
Tom, could you please let me finish my what I'm saying? I was able to check. The deadline for the report is actually in 2021, not 2020. I was able to check my notes on that, so I don't think we're overdue at this point. I do think that we understand the challenge we have with respect to the growing incidences of autism as well as other developmental disabilities, and that we are looking at in this year's budget how we can better serve individuals according to their needs. I think that we need to make sure that we bend that cost curve so that we are able to support increasing individuals. When I spoke about the fact that Margaret picked up on earlier with respect to the increase in enrollments of individuals in the CCO modality, that's sort of the beginning of people's, connection to services. So that is something that is concerning for us as we look towards the future. Ted, I think Commissioner, you had something to say?
Very familiar with the work that the CDC is doing. Marshall and Jürgen Alsop, who runs the Developmental Disabilities branch, is someone who I've known for 30 years. So we have a good relationship with them. The most recent data on this, the surveillance data that they published was that 1 in 54 children in the United States is born with autism. It's difficult to predict their future use of services because there is significant data at this point that shows that about 1/3 of children outgrow the diagnosis of autism as they age. That research was done at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. So it's difficult to predict both future eligibility, future utilization, and cost. But we do look at that data. We see it front door enrollments and the participation of children with autism in the waiver. So we are looking at the waiver as the source of service for those individuals and trying to incorporate growth in our budget. If you go back to the 2019 waiver submission where we actually increased our ceiling for participation in the waiver, it was reflective of what we anticipate to be increased demand, in part the numbers of children with autism. So we are incorporating the data that you've referenced, and we'll get to the report later this year.
All right, Margaret, I want to throw it back to you to make sure that we have other items that you wanted to have addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Roger. The next item was something we have discussed many times, and that is we wanted permission for the localities to make recommendations on any future family support cuts. And I know that wasn't possible the last time, but I know you and Kevin were going to look into it and try and see whether we might be able to get permission for that. Has there been any progress?
Yeah, so I think, right now what we're hopeful is that it's a moot conversation because the 5% goes away because there's going to be federal support. We do
Right, it's moot at this moment, but going forward.
I'm hoping it's permanently moot, because I hope that we don't have to do it. But in the event that we do, without conceding the point, I think we do have some ability to be flexible. What we've talked with our various internal stakeholders about is a process by which we would, for the financial plan, there ends up being a cash target. If there's a cut action that's undertaken, it has a value. When I say the financial plan, that's the ultimate amount of spending that's allocated, to OPWDD or to the various programs within OPWDD. So within that construct, assuming it's X million, whatever that number may be, that there needs to be achieved reductions, we are very much open to the idea of, engaging in terms of how that would be effectuated. And once again, I hope that there is no cut, and therefore we don't have to figure out how to cut. So it's really a post-April 1 type conversation in the event that, that's the direction that, that we go. So we're open to it. We're not there yet because we're hopeful, obviously, for the federal support, and then the actions get restored, and then we move on in life, if you will.
Okay. The next area was role of families. There is a sentiment among many families that OPW doesn't listen to us, that we don't have the same importance to OPW that we did in the past. But we felt we were more a part of things that were going on. There are many different groups, many different constituent groups that you have involved in various different projects. But this is a sentiment that people feel, and I don't know that you need to respond to it. You just need to know how we feel. If there are any changes that you have in mind, that would be, something we would be interested in hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I was concerned by that comment because I don't think that we feel that way. And, you know, there's what you feel and how you communicate what you feel. And there's sometimes a real big gap in there. I think what we've tried to do over the last year, you know, first certainly with respect to, you know, there's been challenges, no doubt, in the last year when it comes to, you know, the lack of in-person interactions and the ability to engage. You know, we're not traveling around the state doing, you know, in-person regional meetings and so on. That's just not, you know, not a feature of our life right now. You know, what we've done kind of centrally is really elevated our family stakeholder groups. You know, so I know there was a request for a number of years that we have sort of a counterbalance so that we've had a habit every month of meeting with our provider association groups. We've now, you know, created a parallel meeting series actually of family stakeholders. I know you know that, Margaret, because you're the representative of the FSS committee there. And so various organized, you know, family stakeholder groups. We're actually doing the same thing now with self-advocates because once again, you know, it's parents, but it's individuals, obviously, who are advocating for themselves that are also essential to providing the guidance we need. We're hopeful of being able to getting back to some greater, you know, regional engagement. Once again, you know, it's very dependent upon safety in terms of how we do that. We are looking at right now, we had a lot of feedback about the lack of 507 planning efforts. And we are looking at sort of post-April 1, you know, how can we energize that process, which is in need of some greater attention. Let's put it that way. And so, you know, we're looking, you know, within the limitations that we have in terms of the current, you know, global health crisis, to get as much input as we can from as many stakeholders as we can. So, you know, whatever you know, concrete suggestions that would be improving of that, we are just very, very open for that to that.
Okay. The next one is very easy. It's a recommendation that front door sessions include an introduction to the local family support services advisory councils and distribute brochures or whatever is available.
Yeah, I think we can do that. I know that we looked at that, and I think that's as you said an easy one. So yeah, I think we can do that and make sure that, you know, we can build the strengthening of the family advocacy at a local level.
Okay. And we move on to the structure of the quarterly meetings. And the main point was we request sufficient time for feedback and sharing of ideas in these meetings. And this meeting is certainly an opportunity for that. So consider this well on the way. The next one was from a different era. Formerly, we used to begin all of our meetings with a commissioner's update, and it was a very useful feature. Now it's different because of COVID, but we would like to see that restored. There are a lot of things that we don't know to ask questions about because we don't even know that they're happening.
Yeah, we can. Ted.
It could be commissioner, it could be Roger. It doesn't matter as long as we get the information.
Yeah, that's fine. We certainly can do that.
Thank you. And the next one was provide minutes of these meetings.
I think we're providing transcript because we've moved into a, you know, because we're conducting ourselves as a public meeting, which wasn't the historic way that these meetings were conducted. You know, it's important that we make ourselves accessible. I can see the ASL interpreter, you know, window. We're doing that. So I think our intention would be simply to provide the transcript because it's actually available. It's part of the service you get when you get ASL interpretation. Josie, I know you don't normally have a speaking role at these, but is that accurate?
Yes, it's the closed captioning service that provides us with a written transcript. We then take that transcript and send it out and have it put into a few different languages based on what people ask for. But it takes about 2 weeks for all that to happen.
Oh, well, that's a nice development. Good. Especially the other languages. That's wonderful. Then the next recommendation was to use, now that we've discovered the positives about virtual communication, use that to connect the statewide committee with the local FSS advisory councils. In the past, we had done that in person, and it was a big deal and it was costly. So it sort of went by the wayside, but now.
Before you get, sorry, Margaret, to interrupt, there's a couple of questions about where do they get a copy of the transcript. I think we put the transcript on our website, if I'm not mistaken, Josie.
Yes, we do.
So.
Good.
Where on the website, I can't, where on the site, we can send out a link. I can't tell you I know the specific, there's like a public meetings section, and then the FSS committee has a section. We reorganized our website last year, hopefully to make it clearer, but I can't tell you where I know where the deep link is, but it's wherever the public meetings are. We can send out a link.
Oh, that would be great.
And thank you, Smolin, for that note as well.
Okay. So what about this notion of virtual meetings with the statewide committee and the local councils?
I think it's a great idea. I think we just would have to figure out the technological aspects of it. I can't say that, that I know they'll, but there's certainly some opportunity there. I would agree with you. I just don't know how to do it. But we can, I think that's maybe something that we can take up offline and figure out the mechanics of it.
Okay.
I just want to add that, like yesterday, Josie had shared with the link. So I shared the attendee link with my FSS members in Queens, and they are attending the meeting right now. So this is one of the way to attend the statewide meeting through Family Support Advisory local.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, when we had these meetings regionally, well, statewide, when we had these meetings statewide, we talked about, well, life was so different then, reviewing proposals, for example, and shared the different, the methodologies that the different councils were using. And we had ideas about recruiting members, and I forget what other topics we explored, but it was useful to share ideas on those things that were different from the agenda of a typical FSS committee meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the technology is there, and in terms of in terms of the ability to knit together groups, and I assume we're all becoming more and more comfortable with this type of technology without having everybody to travel to a place. So if there's ways to help strengthen the FSS committee structures by leveraging that technology, I think that would be sensible.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, now for programs. We were hoping that we'd be able, when things get back to normal, we were hoping that we'd be able to maintain the virtual option as well as an in-person option, because it turns out the virtual option is very helpful for many different types of programs.
Yeah, so one of the challenges we have is combining into a single meeting people who are present in person and people who are virtual. We've had struggles with that. So it works well when everybody's in person. It works well when everybody's virtual, but that's something that we're going to have to figure out. I know that pre-COVID, that was something where those who were, say, calling in to the webcast meeting really weren't getting the same, participation experience that those who might be, in person. I think that sort of hybrid meeting structure, we were actually just talking this morning about how to do that more globally. But I think it's a good project. We probably have at least a couple more of these purely virtual meetings before we can even really reasonably contemplate in person, obviously not knowing when is public gathering going to be a thing we do again, right? Is not in my current crystal ball, but I think we have a little bit of time to figure that out, but a sort of a hybrid structure would make a lot of sense to us, I think.
Right. Well, it works particularly well if you have a parent support group, for example, and people can't get out of the house, they have childcare issues, and but they are missing the whole thing, and they really don't want to miss it, but life gets presented obstacles.
It's hard when one picture is 10 people in a room, and then there's one person who's trying to like get themselves in. It's only everybody's virtual. Anyway, we'll figure it out. We'll think it.
I'm sorry. With all due respect, I apologize for interrupting, but I think the two of you are talking about two different things. I think Margaret is specifically referring to programs for our families. Currently, we're doing some programs that are virtual.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't realize.
That's okay, because Roger's talking about our meetings. That's okay. What I think what Margaret is saying is we would like to see virtual programming continue even after the pandemic ends, because it has been an additional good platform for some of our individuals.
That's right.
Although I'm so grateful for the corrective, Maria. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Me too. But the point you were making still does apply, because you would still have some people who want to come in person and some who would rather not.
Absolutely.
Right, but what I've discovered is that those programs that they're running virtually can continue to be full virtual platforms. And actually, sometimes it saves for commutation, or a parent can't get a child to a particular site for the program. And it could continue to be an additional venue for some of our individuals.
Sure. So let me address that, because I think we do agree with you. So there's a couple elements to that. So the major way that we offered that flexibility during the pandemic was through then there's a note in the note about virtual trainings, which is, I think, a kind of a different thing. But in terms of virtual service delivery, that was something that we did seek approval from CMS to do through these things called Appendix Ks, which were these emergency amendments to the waiver. Because that's a variation from how the services would normally have been, been rendered. Our current Appendix K does expire at the end of this month, actually, and we have a proposal into CMS to continue it beyond, basically to the end of the public health emergency. There were some recent changes in federal policy that allow, the prior CMS policy was 1 year and 1 year only for an Appendix K. So we have asked to extend that further to the end of the public health emergency. We expect a positive response. The second thing we've done is we, in November and December, put out for public comment a permanent adjustment to the waiver that would do two main things. The first was this, exactly what we're talking about here, which is expanded use of tele or remote technology for individuals who would benefit from that service. The second was what we call ComHab-R, which is community habilitation, to take place in the residence for somebody who lives in certified residential. Once again, both of these things were things that were rolled out as emergency response mechanisms. Certainly, once once day programs were closed as a result of the public health emergency, we needed a way to continue to have people get services. So tele, meaning remote, and then for people who do live in certified residential, who are spending the day in the certified residential program, an opportunity to be kind of paying that provider for that service. So late in the summer, last summer, we did some stakeholder engagement where we were saying, did people feel these were positives or negatives or somewhere in between? I think the feedback we got was really overwhelmingly positive, that people wanted to see that as a continued aspect to our waiver. And so we then proposed that, we put it for formal public comment, we did some stakeholder engagement, and once again, we got a very positive response. I would say the only cautionary note, and this is something we're sensitive to, is we want to make sure that those modalities are done for the benefit of the individual and not for the convenience of the provider. So we want to make sure that if somebody says, I don't want remote modality, I want in-person, we want that to be part of, the person-centered planning and service delivery system. So we're very interested in understanding and developing the right kind of guardrails to be protective of those rights. We've submitted, as of the last week or 10 days ago, we've submitted that waiver amendment to make these flexibilities permanent to CMS. I believe we have a meeting, I think this coming week, to have an initial discussion. I have a suspicion that they too will also be very interested in understanding that there are appropriate guardrails. Our service system was developed to effectuate people's living in the community, achievement of their human potential, and it's not to have people kind of sit behind closed doors all day. So that's that's something we need to make sure that we're very careful about as we look at this as a permanent part, as opposed to, obviously when you're dealing with an emergency, when you're dealing with a crisis, you make certain compromises that you might not want to make, in back to normal. So we're very supportive. I'm glad that you asked the question, because I think it's a very important point. And there's, like in anything else, you have to be both working towards something, but also recognizing some of the pitfalls that may arise when you do something. Deb Greif has her hand up.
Roger, and I would like to say that it's been a big help for many of the families. I'm going to say Brooklyn, in the other boroughs I won't disclose anymore, to have a lot of these meetings done virtually, because one of the biggest problems these parents tell me, like when we want to do, like if they want to do support group or the advisory or certain other programs, the problem comes to car fare for not just the individual, it's the parent who may have to bring them, or if it's a support group. And then what do you do with the other children who don't have a developmental disability, but you can't leave them home alone? So I'd like the permission that when we're doing like support groups for parents, means that we can still have the video virtual component still allowed, to make sure that parents can be more participating, because our attendance has gone far higher, and we've been able to help more families by doing it like this. Now, yes, a lot of us miss coming in person, but yet it's been a major help, because I've had parents tell me, oh my God, I didn't have to figure out, should I pay someone to watch my child, but I don't have the money. It's about the non-disabled child. So we need to think, because parents a lot of times have more than one child, or they also could be caring for their senior parent and they can't leave them alone. So I'd like these components to be kept in for forever, because we have to be always evolving to help families, and that's what this Family Support Service Advisory Council do.
Yeah, and I think that that's a wonder. I'm glad that participation's gone up. I mean, I worry about equity issues when it comes to participation, when people have to say take time off, and who can do that and who is not able to do that. The other flip side of it is you do have to be attentive to digital divide issues, right? So you're not excluding those who might not have access to internet, who might not have access to a device. So so I think that this is very related to the kind of question of what do you do with work, and how do you, as we're emerging out of, hopefully, knock wood, the public health emergency, how do we approach work, hybrid work models, et cetera. There's a lot to be worked out, and I think that this is one example of it. I mean, certainly we're encouraging, we don't tell, I think, the advisory councils how to conduct their business, but if that's the more useful modality, by all means, but just be cautious also of the digital divide.
Roger, I just want to add one more thing. I go to the New York City Moped meetings regularly, and the one thing we have been working with the families, and so is Tina Val, we're trying to constantly see families who do not have access to internet. We've been working with as a conduit to help them. And whenever Moped can get us, I've helped a lot of families on the Brooklyn Advisory Council, so they're able to participate because we're able to get them free Wi-Fi or the Wi-Fi or whatever equipment needed. And we're still advocating to keep that on. So I've been working very hard to make sure that this is done because we have so many families who cannot afford. Like we figured out ways to get it for free.
Thank you.
I didn't hear you, Roger. Can you repeat that?
I said thank you. That's a great thing.
I'm sorry, I just was asking because for a second I didn't hear. I wasn't sure. But we still continue because every time there's a parent calls me or emails one of us, and they tell me we let Moped know immediately when there's issues, and they have stepped through to help so many of the families, and they're glad to do it.
That's awesome. I'm glad of that. That's really, yeah. I mean, great.
Well,
Margaret, let me call back on you. See, I don't know if you've been able to see in the chat room if we've missed anybody or.
I haven't been following the chat.
Okay. That's your aforementioned digital divide, multitasking issues, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
There is a question in the chat from one of our new members regarding budget. She wants to know if we can circle back to that.
Oh, sure. Okay, I see. Is it Christina Nair? Hi.
Sorry,
Hi,
guys.
thank you.
You're
No, I
welcome.
appreciate it. And as being new, I don't want to interrupt. Kind of missed the boat on there. I should have jumped off when they were talking about the RFPs with the loss of services. So my question is, up here in, way up in northern New York, it's extremely rural. And when agencies or services then start folding and, they were receiving FSS, what can we do to ensure that those types of funds are reallocated? Because the need is still here, the agencies just aren't.
So yeah, I mean, let me, I'm not aware that there's been, I mean, there was the withhold and then there was the repayment. I'm not aware at this current moment of a, of a suspension of these contracts that's been referred to. I guess I'm trying to understand what has happened, whether there's been a reallocation or whether some things may just have been delayed. We've been quite delayed in certain things, not able to execute new contracts for a period of time. So let me take that and report back to the committee. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what's happened both and I hear now North Country as well as Westchester and Rockland. Margaret, it looks like you have
Evie had raised this issue a number of times. I think if I remember correctly, and Evie, if you're on, just say so.
Yeah.
Contracts had been canceled.
No, yeah, by the agent.
By the agency, and they were not allowed to make reallocations of the money.
I see. Well, let me find out the scope of that and then see. I see. So it's not that we canceled the contract. It's that the agency said, I no longer wish to fulfill this contract for reason X or Y. And there had
I don't know that that's the case in Westchester, though. That's the case in the North Country.
Yeah, this is Ted. If I could comment on that. There is a concern from the councils that unspent monies are lost and can't be reallocated. There's about $56 million per year that's spent, through the councils. And when contracts, can't be fulfilled, are canceled, voided, or for whatever reason, those funds are lost for that fiscal year. They can't be carried forward across another fiscal year. The base for the support programs is not reduced. So this year, if assuming there's no 5% reduction, the base for family support councils would still be $56 million. but it can't carry over whatever sum was unspent from the previous year because OPWDD operates on a cash basis. I think that's part of it. You know, what are councils losing that money? Well, they're losing that money that's not spent in the fiscal year because we operate on a cash basis, but it doesn't affect the base funding going forward.
Yeah, so why don't we work through the numbers? Maria, you have your hand up. We can, I mean, I just, it's a number.
Yeah, I just want to clarify because it's actually that issue as Dr. Kastner has just explained, but it's also two other issues. It's the cancellation of approved RFP money that happened in Westchester, where the RFPs were actually approved and then letters went out saying we're taking the money back. And the question is, are we ever going to see that money because it's been taken back? That's number one. And number two, programs that canceled, that put money back and said, we're no longer going to run this program because of X, Y, and Z. That other pot of money is also being unanswered as to will we ever be able to reallocate that money?
Yeah, and let me just get an appraisal of that. I mean, I'm looking in the chat room. It looks like there's about 80,000 also as noted in the Broome County region. So, you know, I just want to make sure that we have a full appraisal of that and understand. Actually, right now it's kind of a perfect time to try to answer that, as I mentioned earlier, because you know we're at sort of our cash closeout calendar, you know, fiscal year that we're in, and then there's the consideration for cash allocations.
Right.
Coming fiscal year.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, you know.
Yeah, there's a couple of different circumstances that can arise that can lead to the same result depending upon what the triggering event is. I hear that. Kathy Nowak.
Great.
Is her hand up?
Thank you.
I was going to comment, but Margaret brought up the situation about the reinvestment dollars. So my hand is down there.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Gotcha. And obviously this conversation would, in the event that we hope not to be in, which is a manifestation of the 5% cut, you know, these two conversations will converge into one, right? Because if you're talking about, you know, the need to spend less on a year-to-year basis, you know, you would be looking at, you know, obviously places where there aren't existing contracts, maybe. But all right, we'll take this one and make sure that we get the data and then be informed.
And Roger, I just heard back from Abiba. It sounds like just related to the particular topic that Maria brought up in Westchester in particular, it does look like we did connect Joan with you, Maria. So if you have any other areas of follow-up, just loop back to Joan and then she can circle us in. But it does sound like those conversations had already begun. So we'll just make sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row and have all that information. But it does look like the conversation has begun. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you very much, Alexis. Alexis Harrington, who works in our regional office structure overseeing programs, including the FSS program. Thank you very much. I have, oh, there you go. Margaret, hi. Anything else? I don't.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So some
We
of
got
them.
about 11. We got about 11 minutes.
I know. So some of them I think are going to be quick, like this one. Expedite access to services for students transitioning from schools for day programs.
So
I know that's been on your agenda, right?
Right. I mean, we want. I mean, I'm not sure what the question is. I mean, that's
during the pandemic, everything stopped. Sorry.
That. Thank you. Yeah. There's two things, right? There's the capacity, and then there's the planning, right? So I think that what has never stopped and is the regional office processes. You know, we virtualized everything we did through the regional office, and we've continued to operate as an agency. So there's been some atmospherics out there that kind of administrative processes stopped. I think and that's just not true. What has, I think been challenging is obviously as programs have been sharply limited in their ability to accommodate individuals because of the COVID-19 health restrictions. It's I think been quite challenging for people who want to newly enroll in a program. As a program is in a way struggling to maintain its capacity to serve its existing enrollees. This sort of fits for us in kind of thinking about return to normal. It's really a capacity problem in terms of making sure that we are able to bring capacity back online, as well as looking at alternative modalities so that perhaps individuals who might previously have enrolled in a site-based DAHAB, maybe they're going to be better served given the circumstances in a in a more of a community-based, non-site-based programming modality. So we're also looking at how to to the point made about remote modalities for individuals. How do we accommodate the new reality of the situation we're in, so that we can continue to maintain capacity in the system, but also know that maybe returning back fully to the previous business models is not going to be feasible. So it's a very challenging problem, and I think it's one that we're working on. That's part of the guidance that we're working on, and then part of the thing that makes it possible is vaccination.
I'm not au courant, so maybe things have changed. But at the time when we wrote this, the problem really was administrative, we thought. That was our understanding. That people were not being accepted into the system.
I stand to be corrected, but one of the things we did within a few weeks of the pandemic's late March, we started a documentation project. We wanted to make sure that we had about 300 business processes we were documenting, that we went through them and made sure we had a way of doing them, even with the inability for people in the regional offices to actually show up physically to offices for a period of time. And we were very clear and deliberate about making sure that we maintained our administrative infrastructure throughout the pandemic, and in a documentable way. And honestly, some of the things that we found was that we found better ways to do it, more efficient ways to do things than we're not planning on kind of going back to how we used to do it with a lot of paper processes. So my understanding, and once again, I may be wrong here, my understanding is not. It's the problem is we can enroll you in services,
okay.
But if DAHABs are shut as they were for several months, the fact that you've been enrolled in the DAHAB service is not going to be very helpful if your goal was achieving attendance at a DAHAB program. So it's more of a capacity issue than an administrative process issue.
So I think that what we should do, committee members should go back and put their ears to the ground and see what the situation is now. It maybe has evolved. Maybe the thing is all resolved at this point. I don't know.
And if there are areas where we're not doing the job in that area, that's where you can be the eyes and ears on the ground and tell us, contrary to what you told us, it's actually not working very well in X and Y way, and we'll fix it.
Okay, all right. The next one I think is already a fait accompli. The behavior management and crisis intervention supports. The contracts. Those contract services, have they all been converted to waiver?
Yeah. So it's not technically waiver. It's actually a state plan service, but it's Medicaid nonetheless. So the START contracts were converted within the last year, I think, to this CSID, which stands for Crisis Services for Individuals with Developmental Disabilities. So no intended change in the services available to individuals and families, just twice as much money, right? So, we were able to leverage a federal share by making it a Medicaid service. So it was.
And the programs were not changed?
No.
That was the concern.
Same program.
The next was, and I think already addressed by you as well, the guidance for family reimbursement programs. Is that that is a work in progress again? As Alexis says.
I'm gonna go for a lifeline over to Alexis on that one. I have absolutely no idea.
Yes, yep. This is something that we've been actively working on. We know that the guidance is a bit outdated from, the 90s. So that is something we're working on, and we will share that with folks once we have a finalized version.
Do you have any sense of when that might be?
Not at the moment, because, it's really important that we're kind of standardizing everything. So as soon as we get a pulse on that, we'll definitely reach out to you, Margaret, and give you a heads up of when that would be issued.
Okay, good. And the next one is to maintain some level of family support service coordination for people who don't want to go into the waiver, or who can't go into the waiver.
Yeah, so I think there's a larger question there that, I think we framed a little bit a couple meetings ago, which is the interrelationship between FSS funds, waiver supports, care coordination supports for those who might be getting a non-Medicaid care coordination service. We had been talking, I think, substantially about that sort of last summer. In the end, that did not feature in our budget proposal. There were no changes other than the 5%, cut, that we discussed extensively earlier. There were no changes, either positive, negative, or otherwise, depending upon one's perspective for the FSS program in the proposed budget. I do think that's still an area that we need to explore, but it's something that we would at this point be exploring, in essence, in the context of already thinking about perhaps next year's budget for, obviously if we're spending money in a way that's duplicative of another service for no good reason, then that's not the place one should be spending money, right? One should spend it on things that are more helpful. But that's a conversation I think we would probably have in the next couple of months. We'd probably start again having that conversation in anticipation of sort of the next planning cycle for next year.
Okay. The last two items are to do with self-direction. One is to expedite self-direction budgets.
And I would throw it again to Alexis. I know there's been some concerns in certain places. I don't know that we have a systems-wide issue with that. I know there were a couple areas where things had slowed down, but I think that I think I would ask, maybe put that in the same bucket of administrative processes. Is this still a current problem, or is this something that maybe is a little bit outdated at this point?
Okay. And the last item was a request for guidance for family supports for people who self-direct on which family support services are allowable and which are not.
And I think,
for example,
yeah. Alexis fit into the guidance document they're working on it, right? Am I not? Yep.
That's correct. Yep, we'll definitely be speaking to that. Yep.
Terrific.
And there's a request in the chat room that we share like a near final draft with the FSS committee, and I think we can probably do that if I'm not overstepping, Alexis, in advance of finalization, just to any feedback that we need to get from them.
Yeah, I can definitely discuss that with Abiba. I know she's been really leading the charge on this, so I don't have to turn, but yeah, definitely following under her direction. And we still have some review that needs to happen, because we've been really collaborating with every single region to make sure that this is representative to what the providers are doing. So yep, I can definitely circle back on that.
Thank you.
Thank you to whoever brought that up. I forgot about that. Well, that's it. And it's 2:00 on the nose.
We did it, Margaret.
I have a quick question. Since I just heard about the change in delivery of system of ABA therapy or training, ABA services, can this be included in self-direction services?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can make a note of it. I'm not sure. Ted, are you trying to get on?
Yeah, I mean, there's currently legislation pending in this cycle to expand the coverage of ABA in the Medicaid program as a state plan benefit. So I think the first question for us is going to be, what happens in legislation, and then secondarily, how it would affect us before we drop down into whether or not it should be a self-direction benefit.
Got it. Yeah.
Activity.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. So I'm wishing everybody well, good health, safety, and take good care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.